I was realizing that I was working so hard and spent so much time and energy, and I lost the why. The plot was gone. It was just like, what am I here for? Why am I doing this? What is the point? And going through that, and then I feel like the dissonance between who I was and what my life was afterwards was so strong that I had to break free from the cages that I think I put myself in.
If you've outgrown your current path, this is your invitation to step out of the hustle and into your purpose and passion. It can be healing, it can be fun, and it can be strategic. This is where you become the boss goddess in your niche and bring your dreams to life. If creating an intimate place to share your wisdom is calling you, to create your own podcast, to express the stories you want to tell, to shift into a fuller version of the soul-led business that is calling you, but it's feeling hard or like something is standing in your way and you may not even know what it is, then I invite you to the Voice of the Goddess. This is a free ritual guide that I created that has the journal exercises and rituals that guided me forward during my process of leaning in and embracing what is emerging for me, the deeper, more true expression of my own message and gifts. So if you're feeling that same calling emerge and you're ready to stop looking outward for answers and start trusting yourself and reframing your path as your power and reclaiming your voice as your sacred guide forward, then you can download the free Voice of the Goddess ritual guide by just going to boss-goddess.co/ritual guide, boss-goddess.co/ritual guide to get started, and I'll see you on the inside. What happens when you pursue the creative dream, take the unconventional leap, and do what you so believe will bring you the joy and the fulfillment? But the journey doesn't feel good. It doesn't bring the joy. It doesn't bring the fulfillment. In fact, instead, it brings depletion, illness, missed opportunities with loved ones, burnout, and confusion. So where do you begin to figure out why the dream didn't deliver? My guest today isn't alone in her journey to realizing that pursuing the dream isn't enough. It's what beliefs and values you take with you on that journey that will determine how it goes for you, how it feels. I brought my perfectionism and all of my limiting beliefs that I needed to work hard to prove my worth to my very first dream, which was being an actress. And I quickly realized that something wasn't working. And I was able to let it go for a couple of years because I found a lot of freedom and truth in who I was on my journey when I was pursuing creativity coaching, my Reiki energy healing, and creating my first podcast, Dimension, which was an audio drama, and the documentary film that I produced after that. But then when I took another leap in pursuing my next dream of becoming an audio producer, I started to bring in those old habits again and those old beliefs. They were all still there, lying dormant in the background. And I had to untangle this for myself once again. Our guest today, June Suepunpuck, also known as Joy Guide June, shares her journey through this same thing more than once, much like me, and how she found herself once she realized that the joy and the fulfillment that she was looking for is actually within the practicing of it. Now, before I tell you a little bit more about June and what she does, I want to share the way we met. If you listened to last week's episode with Carrie Murray, the founder of the Bra Network, then you know that I just joined her community, the Bra Network. And one day I received this email from one of the other members in Bra talking all about a group that she used to lead within the Bra Network community called the Witches of Bra. And I went on to read this email, and felt all of these aligned vibes pouring from her words. And my first impulse was to immediately respond and tell her how much I'm resonating with her email and that she has to come onto my podcast. I was so giddy with excitement because I felt so connected to her. I felt so seen. And she wrote me back later that evening, just as excited. So our pre-call for this episode was like I was meeting someone that I missed in my life. Like I already knew her. I think you'll hear that in our connection today in the conversation. So in other words, she's a kindred spirit, and I know you're going to love her as much as I do. So now here's a little more about June. June Suepunpuck is a joy guide, speaker, and host of the How to Find Joy podcast. She works with heart-led leaders and high-achieving humans who are successful on paper, but secretly wondering, is this it? She helps them unlearn the pressure to prove, reconnect with what feels true, and lead with soul instead of survival. With a degree in psychology, a past life in Hollywood, and a toolbox full of science-backed and spiritual practices, June guides people through the real work of becoming who they are beneath the hustle, the roles, and the shiny Instagram version of success. Her reflections live inside her podcast and her cozy Substack community, The Joy Rebellion, where the messy middle is always welcome. Her mission? To remind people that joy isn't some finish line you earn. It's a way of living, one honest and perfect step at a time. Here is my conversation with Joy Guide June. Welcome, June.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. I'm really excited for this conversation. You're one of the guests that I found through my inbox, just like apparently my new thing. But I think it's because I've gotten better at my like energetic alignment because people just kind of flow in and I'm like, yes, I have to talk to this person. They're like so aligned with everything that I love about this show and talking about, the topics that we love to talk about here. So
I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you reached out to me and you were saying what your podcast is about and what you're thinking about, I resonated so deeply. I got so excited. I was like, how does she find me? This is awesome. And of course, it's the Bra Network. But I love that that was how it happened because it's so rare. But now I guess you're right. Like once you're aligned, things just kind of flow to you.
yeah, I mean, your reaction to my email to you as well was just so perfect. I was like, oh, yay, it's not just me.
I know, right? It's like making friends as adults. It's like, oh my gosh, do you like me too?
We should make a whole episode about that because it
I
comes up a lot
know.
lately with the women that are new that I'm like learning about and getting to know. And we're always like, how do we do this as grown people? It's so different.
It is very different. And I think it's very important, especially if you've had, an awakening or a midlife crisis or existential crisis, whatever you want to call it. I feel like if you have gone to the depths of the things that have held you back from being your best, most aligned self, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, yeah, not everybody goes through this, huh? Wait, I'm really lonely.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
terrifying.
Yes, I actually have questions around that today because we're going to talk a lot about that space between, which
Yeah.
is, it shows up in so many ways. And I mean, I'm going to make an educated guess and say I feel like women have more opportunities for this transformational moment to occur. I'm just going to say it now. You're a new mom.
I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I do have to say though, oh my gosh. Okay. So to your point about women having this, I've been talking to my husband and he's not into the woo-woo things I'm into, although I try to tell him. And I like, babe, you could totally create men's circles. I feel like they need it. And
Yeah.
what was so cool is I don't know if you watch golf by any chance. I
Mm-mm.
don't either. He does. A lot of men do, apparently. They love sports, this thing called sports. But
Right.
why I'm bringing it up is because this guy, Scotty Scheffler, he's like the number one top. I'm learning a lot about golf. Number one top golfer in the world right now.
Okay.
And after he won, his response, Barcy, was, what's the point? And he went on a whole existential tangent about how he was not fulfilled. I mean, he was fulfilled from like accomplishment, but not fulfilled from the deepest places of his heart. And
Oh, yeah.
no, it's like more men need to probably feel this way.
They
They,
do. They do. And I didn't want to take that away from them. I just think that we might go through it often.
I mean, we
And
have, yes, a lot of opportunities to talk
right.
about it too. Yeah,
And I guess I was just sharing, like, I think women have more baked in opportunities for it. And whether you
exactly.
accept the call or not is a whole different story. But, and I agree, like, my work has always attracted more dudes, actually. So I have a lot of men in my community that feel this way. And my husband was one of them. Originally,
Oh,
we reconnected because of coaching. He has his own way of doing it in a much more like, less, how do I say it? Like, it's not like earth shattering. It's more just like, how do I get to the back to my creativity? It was like really his
yeah,
thing, which is
yeah.
important for sure, not to devalue that by any means. But another great example is a man named Jason Moss, who I also found through my inbox, who's on the
You in
show.
this inbox
I
of
just, it keeps
magic.
happening. I don't know. My email is a special, lovely place right now, um, which is very cool because it can feel the opposite often.
Yeah.
Whoever's listening now can listen to his episode because it's released. And he is just completely shifting how he does business and how he procures clients as well. It's very much like what I'm sharing, where it's just like this organic, lovely, aligned thing where you're not like forcing things into fruition.
Yeah.
And he went through a big life moment too. His was a little geared towards something that happened to him at first or felt like it was happening to him because he was had a
Mm.
diagnosis for cancer at a really young age.
Oh,
But that doesn't mean you just go, great, I'm going to have this big, beautiful journey now. Like that
all
doesn't
right.
really work like that. So,
No, no. I mean, I remember my first spiritual awakening or like a moment of, oh my gosh, what is this life for? What's the point? And it took me so many years after that initial wake up call to be like, oh, so now I'm going to do something about it because it's scary.
it is. And we don't always know what the heck is happening. Like,
No.
can you tell me more about what that first, like what was going on in your life? How, if you don't mind sharing how old you were, I think that helps give us context sometimes. And just sort of what led you to come back to creating some changes? Because I think that will just help us understand like how these things really unfold.
Yes, I'd be so happy to. And I'm so glad because this morning I thought to myself, how old was I when that happened? And I did the math. I was 27.
Okay.
So for those people who love astrology, yes, that is the beginning of my Saturn return. So
Mm,
it was, and I didn't know any of these words, the language of spiritual awakening. I was very science driven, very logical, very practical. And not that I'm not anymore, but I just made fun of that stuff. Like I made fun of the astrology and all the woo stuff that I love now. so, so yeah, it was 27. And I had at that point been in a 9-year relationship with my
wow.
high school sweetheart, was on a very linear track in my life, education, learned psychology, was going to potentially become a doctor or a therapist, in that route, decided to hard pivot and went into costume design. But like by the time I was 27, I was already in the throes of my dream, right? Of
Mm,
being in Hollywood and pursuing a very consistent linear path to what I thought success and happiness was. And at that point, I had made so many sacrifices. I spent a lot of money on education. My parents thankfully supported me and helped me through that. But I feel like as immigrant parents, they were just like, education is everything. We'll sacrifice everything for you so that you could follow this happiness to the American dream that we've been told. Right.
right.
And so by 27, it was really fascinating because I was working. Even though the economy was poop at that time, and then there weren't any jobs really, but somehow I managed to have a career and it was consistent. And I just remember thinking, I have a version of made it. In your 20s, you're just like, oh, I just want to work really hard and do this and get a job that I love and, live the dream.
Yeah.
And I remember I was just sick. I was really sick. I ended up in the ER, pneumonia in my left lung because I just wasn't listening to my body. And I was like, yeah, whatever.
Wow.
Like there were signs, Barcy, there were signs, very
Yeah.
obvious signs to be like, oh. And then another sign came, and it came in the form of my aunt. My nuclear family, my mom and dad and I, the three of us, all are in America. Everybody else is in Thailand. My favorite aunt passed away. She
Mm.
had a funeral. And I was at that point such a people pleaser, so terrified of losing my job. I missed and decided to miss her funeral so that I could pay the bills. And at first, I was like, this is the right thing to do. This is what she would have been okay with. This is what success is. Like, you have to make some sort of sacrifices. Then my uncle died a couple months later. And I was like, this is really, truly awful. And the grief that I had kind of like shoved down started coming up and it
Mm.
started getting a lot louder. But I still pursued the dream and, pursued the happiness and the joy, or what I thought joy was. And then a couple months later, my grandfather died, all on the same side of the family. I know. It was so heartbreaking. And by the time my grandfather passed away, I felt so much guilt and so much shame, and recognized finally my priorities are so out of whack.
Mm.
And, I was also in a relationship that really valued the performative success, the good on paper. We both were kind of like really ambitious people and high achievers, blah, blah, blah. And what I needed at that time was like a place to fall apart, but I had nowhere and no one to do it.
Mm.
And it was so deeply resonant in my body that this was wrong. And that was when I started being like, I wonder if I should make some different life choices. So I did. I went to the funeral. I went to his funeral. And, when I came back, so much shifted within me. And I was like, I'm in the wrong job. I can't live like this. I am surviving all the time. And I don't know what for, because people say that this is successful, but I feel anything but success in my life. I feel like I've failed the things that mean the most. And I recognize now, looking back, that death and mortality are the portals that are the fastest to wake up calls. And I
Right.
needed 3 of them to
Mm.
wake up, in a sense. And I was just like, damn, am I stubborn? And that's what led to being 28 and then leaving my relationship. That was the catalyst to realizing, okay, I need to change my life, because what is the point? None of this matters to me.
Wow. So when you came back from Thailand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was your life feeling just like, oh, this doesn't fit anymore? Like physically, like this, I can't
Mm-hmm.
squeeze myself back into this version that you're already like broken apart. Like you've broken off. I'm picturing like this like cloak you try to put on and it's just like in parts and it doesn't fit anymore. And like it just doesn't make any sense. Is that kind of what it was like for you?
Oh, absolutely. I felt like Humpty Dumpty for sure. You're not going to put me back together again. It really was bad. And I was very depressed. And I was realizing that I was working so hard and spent so much time and energy, and I lost the why. The
Right.
plot was gone. It was just like, what am I here for? Why am I doing this? What is the point? And going through that, and then I feel like the dissonance between who I was and what my life was afterwards was so strong that I had to break free from the cages that I think I put myself in, frankly,
Right.
you
I
know?
so relate to that. There's like a lot of parallels in my story with what you're sharing, which I'll get to maybe later. But the relationship, especially like that makes a lot of sense as a first step because it's right in front of
Mhm.
you. It's inside your daily life. And what's interesting is you had this, like you said, dream job that on the surface, or outside in, I should say, is this like artistic dream that people are envious of the bravery it takes and the conviction to be an artist and like all of these other things that are like kind of already unfundamental, like they're already non-traditional in a lot of ways. So it's so interesting
Yeah.
that you still found a way to layer on this like legacy of boxes that we inherit, you know?
Absolutely. I realize I've been copying and pasting that broken system again and again, even at the beginning of me being a joy guide and quitting my job and deciding to pursue something else. And it still permeates today, which I want to be very clear about it. It's not like I have the answer. I very much practice my joy every day, and I practice detoxing from the system that tells me I need to do more, be more, prove my worth all the time.
I think that's important to say. Yeah.
It is. And I think for me, it was definitely an emotional addiction that I had from growing up, seeing my parents be very codependent, a lot of like actual addiction on one side of my family that I only discovered as an adult that led me to realizing, oh, these behaviors aren't love. Oh, wait, me being in this long relationship is not love. And here are all the reasons why. Discovering, mother healing and father healing after leaving this relationship. And it was just like, they've said this before in spiritual communities where it's, the onion never ends and the spiral keeps on going. And I have felt that way very deeply about this is a perpetual work of art, my life, of mess that I've created and, of joy that I am learning to create as well and cultivate. But yeah, it's a wild process.
Yeah. And I think process and practice are great words to use because, and I think you and I have talked about this in our last conversation about like guruism, like where there's this
Yes.
older, not too distant version of how to or spirituality or, practicing within religion too, like all of these spaces where we want to, reach for a better version, let's say, just to simplify it, where it's like, well, if this person is telling me this is what we should be practicing, then they must be perfect at it. And they're beyond the practice. They're just living on the other side. But like, is there another side? I think it's just the older I get and the more I go through moments like this in my life, this is probably like maybe my fourth cracking open moment I'm having where I'm like, here we go again.
Right.
Where it's like really noticeable and I fell too far back into away from my practice and back into the boxes that I inherited as well, which is so similar. We have similar family structures. I'm the firstborn in this country as well. My parents are immigrants. All of the family is still overseas in Europe. Also, it's just my parents and I and my brother. It's so many parallels there. And my great aunt died too. And I also missed the funeral because nobody wanted to tell me about it because
yeah, we had that too.
they were like, you just want to do your overworking shit. Like you just want to go do all of that. And we didn't want to distract you from that. It was like being fed in this weird way. And I was devastated, but it was very interesting. But it's just so interesting to hear you say that because I'm like, whoa.
Yes, we talked about our commonalities, but as we dived into specifics, I'm like, that's getting real specific.
Those are some details. Yeah. My awakening came a couple years, I'd say, after that, maybe like 4 or 5 years, the first one. But I was about 30. And the first thing that happened was a relationship breakup too. And there's like, we could just keep going.
I know.
It's so interesting.
I mean, I wonder out there for the audience, like how many are nodding their heads too, being like, no, that is so similar to me. And what I have come to realize about the guru part was that being somebody who really did not study that, and I had religion kind of fed to me. So spirituality was like fed to me through the Buddhist school, the temple that I went to growing up. And then my parents put me in Catholic school. So I had a very indoctrined version of spirituality that kind of traumatized me, not going to lie.
Also confusing and conflicting perspectives there.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm thankful now because I like can pick and choose, which is so not what Catholics want to do. It's so anti-Catholic, but I do value some of the values, right, that they've brought to my life. And so for me, spirituality was so foreign and I went really hard the science way and the logic and the practical way that I kind of was like turned off from spirituality and anything intuition based because of that fact, of being told what to believe and think and all that. Yeah. So for me, kind of having this breakthrough, going through this awakening or mental breakdown, whatever you want to call it.
Existential realization.
Yeah. Do you want me to be honest or do you want me to be honest?
Yeah.
I feel as though I, at the beginning of my journey, was really looking for a guru.
Mm,
And I was looking for answers and, frankly, certainty. And there is so much uncertainty in the existential crisis that you will look to books and people and gurus and teachers. And I feel like I definitely got taken advantage of. And now in my work, a part of it is to share the red flags, to really say, hey, I wish someone told this to me because I feel like it's important to learn discernment, recognize your own intuition is your power, and recognize where you're giving your power away. And that's why joy is so important to me, because joy is a lot of work, actually. That's why everyone's like, oh, I wish I was joyful. It's like, yeah, because it takes practice and process, like you said, of knowing yourself, of going to the dark grief places that you don't want to go. And I believe in polarity, like dark and light, good and bad. That's part of the universal rules, I believe, of the world that I can see until somebody debunks it.
hmm
But like true to form as well of like joy and grief. Like I don't believe that they are separate. I think they're on the same spectrum.
mm.
And in order for you to feel the depths of one, you can feel the depths of the other. The contrast is important.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea of shadow and light because through just like a scientific understanding of how shadows work or why shadows are cast,
Right.
you can't have a shadow without light, which means both are
Exactly.
equally possible and both equally exist at the same time. They coexist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one isn't like speaking of good or bad, like one isn't good or bad, it's just both exist. And if we
Exactly.
ignore half of ourselves all the time, I mean, the ratios aren't that perfect, like 50-50, like, but
I
just
know.
again, to simplify, we're missing part of the joy. We're missing part of the light. Yeah. So I'm
Right.
hearing you when
Right.
you share that. And it was a concept that took me a really long time to understand or to really just even know or have anything to look to. That I remember when I just didn't get it. Like it just wasn't information I had.
Yeah.
And learning about these things for the first time were just so eye opening. And so the thing that comes to mind the most, and you brought this up a little bit too about the idea of choice, like
Mm-hmm.
just realizing that you can choose, that it
Yeah.
isn't inflicted on you. Like the religions, for example, like you get to seek
Mm-hmm.
out your own version and you do get to pick what works for you and you can create your own values and you can start to walk towards a version of you that feels like you. And that's the beauty of intuition, like work. To me, the intuitive work is so much that.
Spot on. I couldn't agree more. I think for those who are scared of the grief, because jokingly, my clients now know me and they're like, oh, June, you're a joy guide, but really you're a grief guide. And I'm like, yeah,
Ah.
because in order to get to the other side, you have to identify where in your life it doesn't fit anymore. Like, where's the dream that has expired? Where
Mm,
is the version of you that you need to shed and let go of? And that is grief. It is as strong as losing someone three times in one year. Like it's the death part is very real. And I think in my work as a joy guide, I wish I had somebody who joy guided me through it because it can be so lonely to
hmm
recognize sometimes overnight that you're not who you thought you wanted to be. You're definitely somebody you think you should be. And
hmm
now it feels very deeply wrong to continue on, being this version of yourself that you don't even understand or know.
Yeah. How did you walk through those first moments when you were discovering that?
Right. I think when I actually went to the peak of my career, I quit in 2019 and I was at the peak of my career. And at that point, after 2012, all I feel like I was doing was like, whew, I'm detoxing from the relationship issues. I'm relearning what it means to love. I
Mm-hmm.
am doing this deep work to untangle and unmesh myself from someone else
Mm-hmm.
and the behaviors and the identity. But it wasn't serious. I went to therapy and that was good and I appreciated it. But I was also like, okay, cool, check boxed therapy. I did it. Oh, the crowd goes wild. Go, June. You went to therapy. I'm like, yeah. I
I
healed
do
that.
therapy. I'm
Have you
good
guys heard
now.
about therapy? I mean, like those memes where they talk, make fun of the people who go to therapy and all they talk about. I was kind of that.
Some therapy
And
today.
yeah, so my therapist, and of course I value it. I wanted to be a therapist. So I really valued all of that and I still do. But it was also kind of just like me talking about the same experiences. And I felt like I was kind of rehashing a lot of the trauma that I went through. And so I felt kind of stuck.
Hmm.
And so to not feel stuck and lost anymore, I guess what? Dove deeper into my work. I was like, you know what the answer is, Barzy? More work.
Something to do.
More check boxes. Guys, I figured it out. More
Yeah.
check boxes.
That's so interesting, only because it's just interesting to me how we do this as humans, how we're like, all right, like I need to shed all of this thing that's not working, but like we still find a way to default to it. Like it's
I
we're still
know.
like, I know how to do this really good. Just I'm just gonna do it over here instead of over
Right.
there.
Exactly. I'm going to do the same thing, but it's going to be the same outfit for different color, you know?
Right, right.
So essentially, it wasn't until 2019 when I quit my job that I feel like I started getting somewhere real. But it took me in 2018 going to my first coach. And at that time, coach wasn't as prevalent as it is today. Like it was still kind of like on the fringes. I didn't even know what it was. I heard about it like from a friend and they were talking about business coach. So I was like, okay, I'll look up coach and Yelp that.
Yeah.
And so I did. And I found somebody who got great reviews. And I was like, great, I'm going to join this. And they're going to help me get an agent because that is the answer. That's the answer.
Ah. So they were a business coach?
Business soul coach,
Okay.
therapist as well. So it was like the trifecta that I really wanted. But I had no idea. I didn't really look into it. It was my first intuitive hit in a really long time to be like, do this,
Mm.
apply to that. And when I even said yes, I was like, I think I'm saying yes to this. But when I actually got into the container, it was with 20 women, 19 other women. And they were all coaches except for two people, me and one other person. So it was like a coach for coaches.
Oh,
So
wow.
I had no idea. I was just like, okay, now that can we stop talking about coaching? Because I just want to talk about how to get an agent.
How funny. Well, that just speaks to like you just completely going with your intuition and like just being like, I'm supposed to be there. I don't know if it makes any sense, but here we are.
Totally, but still lost, so lost. Again, no idea, but thinking I know the purpose. And everyone, funny enough, they reflected back to me now. They kept calling me Joy. They kept being like, Joy. It's like, oh, sorry, you're just so joyful. I just, June, that's right. And
June,
so
I
I,
have to tell you, sorry to interrupt, but every time I go to like write your name or say something or do something, I call you Joy first in my head. Like it's the weirdest thing. I'm like, why am I mean, yes, she's a joy guide, but so that's just so funny that you just shared that because I constantly have to switch it in my brain back to like your actual name, which is June,
I
not Joy.
know, but that is, I guess that is the power of embodying something that is true to you, whether it's joy or what, it doesn't even have to be an emotion, but like just something that's innate to you. But at that time, I genuinely was like, oh, this is annoying. First
Sure.
off, my name is not Joy. Secondly, if you guys only knew how far away from joy I feel right now, it was reflecting something so deeply sad in me because I was so out of alignment. But universe kept being like, ping, like here are signs, here are things to do. And I bring this up to answer your question that you asked a while ago at this point. But what I was going to say is like, I got through because of community.
Wow.
The person who led the group and my coach, I value them deeply. And also, it showed me certain things that I was like, okay, here are certain red flags that I know now. And also, I walked away with lifelong friends that are priceless, right? And so, because of that community, I was able to quit my job in 2019.
Mm.
You know, the program was over. I had kind of slightly transitioned from being working in Hollywood and on films and commercials and doing styling to personal styling. So I was like, oh, I'm going to help people from the outside in feel better. And let's just focus on CEOs and thought leaders because I thought that was going to make a difference. Again, I'm like, I'm making a difference by making a difference for them.
Well,
And
you
then,
were in its own way. Like you have to take steps, right? And
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And also like financial steps, right? Like
Hmm.
that was my financial way to get out of being on set. But then there was just a certain point where that just wasn't working anymore. And I got everything that I could have ever wished for in my career, in my opinion of what success was for my dream. And that was when everything blew up. And I was like, I can't do this anymore because I hit the peak and I'm at the top of the mountain. And I'm just like, wow, this view sucks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I feel empty, tired, exhausted, burnt out, and alone. Okay, this is so not what I signed up for. There is no joy here. Then I wanted to shout to everybody, guys, when you reach the top, there's no joy. Go back.
Turn
And
around.
a turn around. And I feel like this Scotty guy kind of did that. He was like, I'm the top golfer. And everyone's like, oh my God, what's it feel like? And he's like, what's the point?
Hmm.
And to me, that's a gift. He's only 29, apparently, which is insane.
Amazing.
Right. But I feel as though that message will hopefully resonate with so many people who are striving and chasing and going through destination addiction. And they can be like, whoa, I don't need to climb that horrendous mountain. There are other ways to be happy. That's my hope.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing that because it is this, you say, you called it destination addiction, right? Like this
Yeah,
idea of arriving.
it's coined by Dr. Robert Holden.
Okay. Thank you for that. I was wondering because it's the first time I heard it phrased in that way, which I didn't have words for yet. And I think a lot of people are facing this right now and having this or wanting to have this conversation with themselves, which is why I want to have this conversation with you as like people who have approached it in that way and like sort of lived that path of actually getting to a success marker where you feel like I arrived supposedly. This is everything that it said on paper and here I am and this paper sucks. Like I don't care about this piece of
Yeah.
paper and you just want to throw it off the hill and be like, can I just come back down? Like, can I go back to, I don't even know what? Like, I totally get that.
Yes. And that was the biggest question is like, what do I do now?
Right.
And what is my purpose? Who am I without that relationship that held me for so long? Who am I without this job that has held me for so long? Like, if I shed all the roles that I've thought I needed to be or have, who am I? And that's the question I feel like I help my people with is answering that question and kind of sharing in the fact that, hey, it is going to be messy. It
Hmm.
is not a pretty unfolding usually, but it can be more conscious. You can have a buddy. Hello. And you don't have to go through this alone. And I built my community in Substack in the hopes that it will attract people to know that they have a community, to be able to understand that falling apart doesn't mean that you have to fall alone.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, I think, are still even understanding or trying to understand like what an existential crisis is or what is baby step number one, that it's like community. It's like, I don't even know what I'm going through. It's so disorienting. I'm sure you understand that.
Disorienting is a great word for it. And I think it's true in regards to like baby steps, like what is the step? And I've had people express that to me as well. Like, how do you get to the quote unquote next level or up level yourself, chapter churn, whatever the word is for
Yeah.
us, right? And like, what does that process really look like? Or what do you like, what is that? And then also, like, where do you look for help? Who helps with that? Like, what do you look for? And I think that's disorienting too. I mean, disorientation is like the best word for it because it feels there's so much going on. There's so many layers to it, and each person is bringing a very unique set of those layers to the party, if you will.
Exactly. And that's why, like, in my work, I feel like I will always, always, always say, do this work with me, aligned with a therapist, psychologist, psychiatrist. Please allow yourself the container of an expert to unravel and to understand the science behind it and what is happening to your body or what medications you might need. Because I think that is so important. And there is also a spiritual part of it that they're not allowed to touch for medical reasons and important reasons, right? But I think that's where I fit in, to be able to kind of like hold your hand and walk alongside you, because this messy path is very messy and the disorientation is real. And, I think that's part of the reason why I created my own podcast, literally called How to Find Joy, because I was like, okay, I'm going to go on a journey of how to find joy. And I was still thinking of like, maybe there's a formula. Everyone can share 3 steps. And I love the first season, but I've been on major pause. We've talked about this on my second season because it is still formulaic in a way of like, well, here are the steps they did. Although, yes, that is so amazing. I feel like what I've learned from the season is everybody has a different experience. Everyone has something unique to their unfolding, their awakening. And to slap a formula on it is offensive to me now, to think that we have the audacity to know the formula for this really epic life rite of passage. Like, what? Who are you? Oh my gosh, really? But that was me naively wanting the answers, right? Yeah. And so I paid for the programs or the gurus or the people who told me like, oh, well, I'm going to guarantee that you're going to get XYZ result and you'll find your joy. And I'm like, ooh, yeah, that's not how that works.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And my podcast has changed so many times over the years too, that I've had it. And my audience has been on this journey with me in so many ways. But you mentioned discernment earlier, and it really comes back to, I so strongly believe in us becoming our own guides in so many ways. Like, not out there by yourself trying to do it all yourself. That's not what I mean when I say that. I just want to disclaim that a little, because having someone like you said, having a buddy or having like a little mini team, and when you're ready for community or vice versa, whatever works, so that you're not on your own, is so lovely. And some of us default to trying to do it all yourself anyway. That's one of my boxes that I just have a really hard time getting out of. This is one of my ways of making sure I'm realizing that I'm not alone. It's a very meta experience that I'm always having on the show.
I resonate deeply with this. And I think isolation has always been, because I work with a lot of high achievers and they default to internalization and they're used to working things out for themselves and performing success. And so isolation, or self-isolation, should I say, is very common, and to even ask for help. Like, I remember when I was like, ooh, I think I need a therapist. I was like, you failed. You're crazy. This, like, we need to commit you. There were narratives from my parents' generation that still believes in that, and thankfully, we have a new generation that is just like, if you haven't gone to therapy, it seems odd, I value that shift. But yeah, it is, the isolation is also a byproduct of feeling like the need to have it all together, and to ask for help is really hard. And for me, I think like being somebody who supports you in knowing your own power and your intuition and your discernment is all I could ever ask for. Like, I don't want you to be codependent with me. Like, I went to Al-Anon and Codependence Anonymous, so I do not want codependent clients by any means. I want to share with you, guide you. Here are the tips and tools and red flags, and then send you on your way, because I want you to live your best life on your own terms, right? Not what I think is best. That's my opinion. But I want everyone to reclaim their power, because I feel like that's what has been happening to me. I've just been giving away my power. I'm like giving away my power to the education system, giving my power away to the government or the systems that, we're told to uphold, giving my power away to my parents or a relationship or, a guru or, somebody that I really, really believe in now or whatever. So I want us to reclaim our power and also recognize who is trying to take away our power.
Yes.
I think that's very important in discernment. And you and I chatted a little bit about it, but, I think even in the tools that I love and use in my work, astrology and human design, I have had moments where I'm like, I'm going to toss all of this out because this is taking away my power. I'm not signing this contract because it's Mercury retrograde. And then I'm like, no, it's taking away my power. I actually want to sign this contract. What are you doing? And I was on the track for human design certification. I was like, this is it. This is the system. I want to do this. Because again, defaulting back to honoring certifications and diplomas and achieving something, right? And as I was going through the highly acclaimed school for human design, it was very clear to me that they were like, yeah, we don't want you to use any other systems.
Right.
What we teach is the way. And then that was like, eject button. Sorry, my bad. I feel like everything is an interpretation. And that is important. That is so important for discernment. Like how you interpret it, how I interpret it, all different. What lens are you seeking your answers from?
I love that. And I so relate to that. That's how I navigate it too. And human design has gotten really popular and I'm often asked about it. And I tend to forget like what my identifications are because I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
really care.
Yeah.
I care when it's fun and I care when I'm like curious about something. I'm led by curiosity quite a bit, which I think is just fun and a fun way to navigate. But I looked into that one deeply as well as one of the few that I was like, well, maybe there's something here. It keeps coming up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's not that there isn't anything there, but I'm right with you when it's like, this is the way. I'm like, no, 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 no. There
No.
is no the way. It's my way. It's my way
Exactly.
or the highway. No, but like, not like that, but just it has to be this like meddling of things. And it's funny, like my mom brings up moments where, she's been off and on this journey too, where she'll take some breaks. And I think it's honestly just her like, exercising her discernment as well and not really realizing
Yeah.
it and putting something down for a while and realizing she's just not interested anymore and I'm like no, that's okay. You may have just gotten what you needed from it right now and then you
Exactly.
evolve or you
Yes.
implement.
Yes. And I
Yeah.
feel like that's so important. Like I value all the tools and systems, science or spiritual, whatever. I value them all. I think they can open up something in you at the right time, and
Yeah.
then you can drop it. But I want the audience to recognize, or your audience to recognize, like the certainty that we're craving could also be the thing that is giving your power away. So when you are actually looking for answers, look at who the teacher is. Look at what you're reading. Like, where is the source? Are they trying to convince you that this is going to be the best thing for you? This is the way. Like, those are the red flags that I'm talking about. That naively, my like kid-like self was like, no, Santa's real. Totally. Yes, I want to believe. And again, if you were meant to go into a cult, I'm not going to judge you. I totally think that that was your way, your path of learning. Like that's totally fine. But if you can avoid some of the things that might put you in a long-term bad situation, then I'd like to share. I'm maybe more like your mom. Like I want to try this and then I take it off. And then I want to try this and I'll take it off. And I'll really believe in it. And then later on, I'll change my mind. And that has been, again, as somebody who was taught to believe in a core truth, and this is the truth, whether it's religion or education, I now value deeply somebody I meet that can say, oh, I changed my mind. Because it took me a lot of humility and a lot of unlearning to say, it's okay that I don't know, and I'm allowed to change my mind. And I think we need more of it.
Yeah, I think it's hard for so many of us. And I pick things up and put them down all the time as well. And I just allow myself to resonate with whatever's resonating. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm getting more comfortable with being honest with myself and sharing that out loud and saying I'm allowed to change my mind. Like those are
Yep.
powerful words. And it's good to say them. And it's good to point that out as a choice that we
Yes.
don't have to find this like almighty answer of the right way to live or the right way to be happy or the right way to succeed or the right way, fill in the blank, right? Oh, there's like a zillion
Right.
ways to answer that or like fill in the blank for that search. And the more and more, every time I go on this journey, I realize I'm just searching for myself. And at the center
Mm-hmm.
of that
Yep.
question, the answer is always just coming back to a more true version of me. And whatever tools I use along the way are just fun guidance.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And I want it to be fun, like I want the exploration to be fun because it is hard. It's like let's make it harder. I don't want
Yeah.
that. I think that's part of the joy of the work that I do, is that I want to make it a lot more light and bring some of the levity into the heaviness of the experience, and not like bypass the heaviness or the reality of the grief, but to like face it head on, and maybe we can laugh about it, and be like, oh my God, remember that time you did this? And that was crazy. And then kind of like move forward from it in a way of like, okay, but what did we learn? And how are you more honest with yourself? Like you talking about honesty. I've been sitting on the idea of like, well, what do I believe joy is now? Because I've heard so many different definitions at some point. And I think Merriam-Webster says it's actually externally driven. It's like when you reach a certain success or whatever. And I'm like, ew, no, I don't like that definition. And now I am just thinking about like, okay, if I were to define joy now in my life, it would be the experience of being so radically honest with myself and showing up. This is the key part, showing up in my body in a way that honors exactly who I am today.
Ooh.
And that's really hard for somebody who's like, okay, because when I first started the Joy Guide thing and the name came to me, people were like, oh my God, that's so you, June. Great. And then again, that tricky part of my brain was like, well, now you have to be joyful all the time.
Right. Yeah. The
You got to
pressure.
present. Yeah. It like went back to performative success. And I remember being like, okay, I think I've got it. I think I figured out the formula, right? Because again,
Right. And then
searching
you
for that
start a
formula.
podcast.
Right? And even starting the podcast and even doing all the things, it was like just every single bit. I was like, oh, shoot, right. Now more than ever, post baby, and recognizing I really have an accountability buddy in my arms, watching my every move.
Mm-hmm.
Now more than ever, I feel like I can't lie to myself. And that is joy to me, because I feel like the performative part that I believe a lot of high achievers will resonate with, or people pleasers. It's like, man, the truth felt so harmful. Like I'll lose my job, or this person won't love me anymore, or, whatever the risks are. It felt so big. And now after doing this healing process and grieving and facing the pain, the joy of being honest is priceless. And there's an aliveness. It feels like skydiving almost. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, I'm really going to tell them how I feel. Like somebody asks you, like, how you doing, June? I'm like, the joy of saying what I mean. Like, this is going to be juicy. And before, it was uncomfortable because I had to practice and I was uncomfortable being like, okay, well, my default is I'm fine, but I'm not fine. So what do you do, June? What do you do? And then I had to practice, right? To be like, no, I choose to be honest with myself. I choose to feel the joy of being authentically and genuinely and truly me. Here we go. And people at first were just like, oh, because they're so used to me being like all happy and stuff. So they were like, wow, you were like really struggling last time. And that lens of judgment felt like there was a spotlight on me shining all my flaws. And I was like, I'm never doing that again. That was too horrible.
Right.
But now I've had so much practice. I'm like, oh yeah, cool. Let's do this. I'm not doing great, guys.
Well, you're probably teaching the people around you as well, and they're learning the new way to communicate with you or how you're going to communicate with them. At least that's my assumption. Is that kind of what you've noticed, or did some people go away?
I would say that in my honesty journey, I broke off a lot of relationships and some people left. And I think it was because I was recognizing that the relationship and the friendship was a lie, and
Right.
it was like, oh, I stayed with them because of history, or I stayed with them, because I would feel really bad because it feels like a breakup, even though we're friends, like,
Those are harder, I
oh
think,
my
because we have
gosh,
no
yes.
rule book for that. There's no one talks about friendship breakup, which we were talking at the top of this as, how to become friends as adults. But what about breaking up with friends as adults or ever? It's so painful.
It's so painful. And I think it always brings up my childhood wounds,
Me too.
of like, oh, I don't belong, or I'm being rejected and they're going to abandon me. Like my best friend and I always talk about that. She was the one that actually introduced me to Al Anon. And Al Anon, by the way, is for families and friends of alcoholics.
Thank you. I was just going to
So
have you do that.
Yeah. Because I thought it was for the alcoholic. And so I was like, oh, I don't need to go to Al Anon. I don't even drink. But
Yeah.
I realized it was like, oh, when I went to the meeting, I was like, wow, this really resonates. I was just coming to support you, girlfriend. But damn, are they saying, spitting some truth out? And then I realized, oh no, I was in a relationship with someone who abused alcohol. Then I found out that my mom's dad was undiagnosed alcoholic. And so those codependent behaviors that kept me in those friendships and relationships and that emotional addiction to pleasing them was way long in my lineage.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to figure all that out before I could break up with friendships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so many layers of work and discovery and grief and processing and facing fears. So I get why people will be like, nah, I'm just going to stay in it.
Yeah. It's easier just not to say anything.
Oh, we'll
I'm
just ghost him for
fine.
a while. It's fine.
Yeah. There's so many like ways to deal with or to, attempt to deal with those types like the relationships that are older, or like you said, the ones that are just because there's so much history or things like that, I think are vague, I guess, in how to deal
Mm-hmm.
with sometimes. It's like you have to look at your own, we have to look at our own sort of what do we want out of this? Is this serving me in any way or is this just sort of existing? And then it starts to feel inauthentic at some point.
Right. Again, back to the question that I always want everyone to ask is like, where am I lying to myself? Like,
Yeah.
how can we get more honest about the things that are bringing us joy and what isn't bringing us joy any longer? And I think the attachment to the familiar hell seems to consistently win. And I know from personal experience. So when people come to me and they're like, oh, but that's so hard, I'm like, so get it.
Well, I think it's
Been there,
important, right?
probably still there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for your
Go to
work,
meetings for that. Yeah.
you can relate to them on this very personally lived level. I'm sure is useful. I mean, I know it is because that's how it works for me too when I'm, guiding anyone in any capacity. But I'm curious. So I'm going to share something that I'm walking through this right now a little bit. And my tendency is to then spiral, like
Mm-hmm.
just spiral into the oh my God, like all of the messaging that it's all from the old wounds and all the good stuff. Did you experience that, or was it presenting to you differently, particularly with like suddenly sharing how you feel about things with old friendships, let's say, or
Sure.
just friendships in general? And I do think this is why I bring it up, besides my own experience, like experiencing it right now, but just this idea of wanting to take a step in this direction when we're feeling pulled in wanting to be more authentic in our own experiences and having to somehow weave that into our external life with the people who
Yeah.
don't know us that way yet. It can bring up so much fear.
Yeah.
Like you touched on it a little bit just now of like, oh, I'm good. Like, let's just skip that part. But there's a point where you can't.
I
And
know.
it's not super fun. And for me, my reaction has been to just like mentally spiral and feel anxious all the time. It's
Mm-hmm.
bringing up
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. And I'm curious, like, what your experience was like with that, if you had any of that, or if it was different. And then also, how do you guide people through a moment like that? I think it's what holds a lot of people back from going on the full journey.
Yes, I think that's what was happening to me post 2012. And it was however many years of spiraling. And the spiral for me definitely looked like intrusive thoughts of you're going to fail, you are a failure. And I guess my stubbornness in a way of like being a high achiever and sending myself to the hospital to do so was like, I really feel like my stubbornness kept me in longer. I stayed
Mm.
in the relationship for 10 years, like probably 7 years too long. You know what I mean? Like I get the spiral. And I think my spiral has in the past made me feel like I was held back, but I had unfinished business looking back on it now in retrospect.
Hmm.
And so I don't judge it anymore. I try not to judge it even when I'm spiraling now as a mom. Like that is a huge rite of passage that I decided to take on at 40. And I was grateful enough to be able to experience the journey upon the decision. And I truly am always constantly trying to calm my nervous system.
Mm.
And the catharsis moment that I share, that I'm currently experiencing now is like I'm returning to a lot of the things that used to bring me joy. For the longest time, I would spiral and then like go to work and like go do work. Let's just be somebody. Let's make the money, get that bread. And then I was like, oh my God, this was so fulfilling. And then, I get off of work and then I'm an empty shell of a human being. And I recognized in that process of spiraling, I let go of everything that brought me joy. I stopped singing. I stopped dancing. I stopped writing. I stopped doing everything that brought me back to me. And so, in this motherhood journey now, as I spiral in intrusive thoughts of my own mom dying, I have started writing again. And so that's why kind of Substack came back, or Substack came back. Substack came. And I started it. And, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to talk about joy and it's going to be great. And I'll share my experiences. And then when I started writing, I was like, okay, should I share this? Because this is deeply personal. And also, my mom may read this. And is she going to want to hear my intrusive thought is my mom is going to die? Like,
Right.
there is so many layers of, ooh, let's just hide. And I think that is what blocks our joy is we feel like we need to dim our light. We need to dim our joy. We need to package it in a way that is palatable for others.
Right.
And even this Substack and this new version of myself, I'm learning, oh, right. There is value in just showing up as who I am. My cathartic moment of admitting this has actually shown up to be helpful for so many people. I have gotten so many messages from people that I haven't talked to in years being like, I felt the same way, or this is what I'm doing now. And I was in a spiral, and you sharing that was so helpful because I don't feel as alone or crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I've been doing myself personally to get out of my current spiral. But it has looked so many different ways. But I think that's why it's helpful to talk to somebody. And arguably, some people would be like, you can talk to ChatGPT. That is true. You can ask ChatGPT what it is. But there is something also to spiraling in community, that the human to human connection is something that I feel like has brought me so much deep joy, because receiving love from a stranger who resonates with me, or feeling like somebody understands me, I think that's a very human thing to want and desire, the belonging, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, chat could be good at some things, but I think you're still human. And that human touch and that human resonance and that relatability is so vital for our existence, in my opinion.
I so agree. And I was using Chat GPT all morning before we did this call. So
I
there's a
use it
world
too.
there's a world where
Yeah,
both exist and they're just
exactly.
useful in different ways. And it is interesting because it is such a positive conversation every time you have a conversation with Chat GPT. But so I get why people are gravitating to it for this as well. But it's not going to help you grow. Let's put it that way. In terms of your personal development, it's not going to help you normalize your experiences in the way that we can energetically resonate like we're doing today on the show. Like there's just something about this experience that can't replicate, in my opinion.
Yeah. And arguably, it has sent me into more of a spiral because it'll prompt me and be like, do you want to talk about this more? And then I'm like deep diving into what else is wrong with me.
Oh, wow.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so it's like polished in a positive way,
Hmm.
but I'm also just like, oh no, I didn't think about that. And
Yeah.
so there's no limit, right, to what you can ask and where you can go with this growth. But then in the end, I'm just like so tired and exhausted by all the things I need to do that I just give up and I'm like, I'll just stay in the spiral, whatever.
Right. I mean, Google works that way too. And we all started Googling our medical
Right.
issues. And then now everyone thinks
Stay
they're
away
dying.
from WebMD.
Yes, it's kind of the same thing. Like you don't want to
Yeah.
use it as medical advice.
No, no. But I mean, I do value it. But I don't think it's going to teach you how to necessarily embody more authenticity or being genuine or honesty. That does take practice in real life with someone else. Although I'm sure practice with chat or via voice, but there is something very magical about being able to be witnessed in the rawest, realest, truest form of whatever you're willing to share.
I think I do feel that that's actually what we're craving. Like the thing
Yeah.
that we're seeking is that. And if we're not letting ourselves have that, then we're not going to get that. We're not going to fulfill that part that is a big part of this, I think, this whole journey that we're discussing today about like trying to be more authentic and trying to be finding more space for ourselves. Like we need that human witnessing. We need that normalization. We need that connective tissue, if you will, like to really feel the fulfillment and embodiment that you're talking about, I think.
I agree. Being in BRA, so Business Relationship Alliance, the founder is Carrie Murray. That helped my entire career transition. You know, they met me as a person who was costume designing and styling in LA,
Oh, I didn't
in
know
the
that.
movie and commercial industry. They knew me as that. That was the first version of me they met. Then it's like I quit my job and I was like personally styling and they hired me for that. And so then it was like, oh, guys, this isn't it. I feel really lost. And they held me in that. And then it was like, okay, I think I'm a joy guide. And they were like, well, what does that mean? And they held me in that and they hired me as a joy guide. Like I was only able to financially transition from one to the other because of community.
Wow.
And for that, I deeply value community and like the right one that's the right fit for you, and why it's so important now for me to build a community. And even within BRA, I remember going to Carrie and I had just moved, I think it was COVID, and we needed community more than ever at that time, right? Because we're so separated. And I was living in
Mm-hmm.
the snowy mountains, so I was very isolated. So I'm like, oh no, if I don't find my community, I need to make one. And so I pitched to her, I was like, okay, Carrie, I'm coming out of the spiritual closet. I would love to create something called Witches of Bra. Can we do this? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. I love that. I'm game. And so from that, I built like a coven, which at that time even though I was so enmeshed in it, I had cranial sacral therapy, energy healing, like schooling, and like really was so deep into the spiritual community at that point that I was just like, ooh, but I'm still scared and terrified because if I'm honest about where I am, who's going to reject me? And it was easy to start, challenging to continue, only because there was some pushback on like why the word witches.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I had to do a lot of healing about who I am. And again, giving myself breath to say, I don't know who I am, but in this version of who I'm showing up as, this is what she wants to talk about. Because now I think we talked about it before. I sometimes look at old articles of me back during my super woo days and I'm like, oh, cringe. Even though I deeply like resonate with it still, but there's something in me that I feel like is more embodied in the balance of the two. Like I want to experience all the extremes, that now I'm just like, oh, that was like the cringe version and the extreme version of me in that direction. But again, talking honestly, openly, I value community so deeply. It has helped me form in ways that I never thought I would be able to.
That is really informative in the sense that I think some of the scary parts of walking through new identity is that sometimes you have to walk through 4 or 5 of them first. And you're like, people are going to think I'm insane. And like, whatever the noisy message is, like to me, that's like how it comes through sometimes. Like, oh, my friends must think I'm out of my mind because I'm doing this right now where I'm like, I do this. No, I do this. No, just kidding. It's this. Well, actually, it's this. I have 5 businesses. They're all happening. Like, it's just like a lot of identity things happening at once that are just not simplified yet in a way that is like embodied is the perfect word for it.
Yeah.
But like having this experience with a community that's like, okay, yeah, we'll embrace you anyway. Not anyway, but like we'll embrace you through this moment and then we'll embrace you through the next and we'll embrace you through the next. Like that is so affirming, I would imagine.
Oh my gosh. Yes. It really was, because I think Witches has helped me launch because it was a private, intimate community, right? And so I felt like I was only sharing this part of me with a select group. And so I
Yeah,
was kind of compartmentalizing my life. Like I was joy guiding for the sciencey people. I was joy guiding for the woo people. Like I had different crowds.
I totally have done that.
Right.
Where it's
Right.
like these people over here and these people over here. And I'm going to go way woo with this group and read tarot to them, which is like just a random thing. And then over here, we're just not going to do that at all. We're going to just
Nice. Yes.
be really cerebral about it or whatever it is.
Yes. Yes, I so get that. And they helped me. I feel like that community, because now Bra has changed and they don't do the community groups anymore. So witches at the beginning of this year had to fall away. And in a lot of ways, Carrie was like, okay, June, fly, be a bird. You're free. You can do your own community.
Hmm.
And so then that's why the Joy Rebellion Substack community was like birthed, because it was like, oh, right. I have full permission to show the world, not just this tiny community, but like everyone that this is who I am now. And that will come with a trolls, judgment, whatever, like the high school people being like, ooh, what is she doing? Like in the back of my mind. But that's
Right.
all, again, my own lens of insecurity. It has nothing to do with them. It's just my lens of insecurity of fearing judgment or being misunderstood. But I
Right.
think my biggest joyful moments now are being okay with being misunderstood because I know and trust myself so much more.
And something I wanted to share about that, well, two things. One, thank you for sharing it the way you just did, but this idea of taking another step in a wider, with wider scope, let's say,
Yeah.
you never know who you're granting permission for by doing that, by being in your more authentic version or more fully, however it's being expressed. I'm always so surprised by who shows up sometimes for that, where you're like, who raises their hand and you're like, oh, really? And the people that may resonate are often so many more than we might think. And I was one of them. So I joined Bra recently. Carrie's on the show as well. So you can listen to her episode too, where we talk about it. And your email that I resonated with was talking about this past coven.
Yeah.
I was like, what is happening? Like this, I was not expecting that here in this, what I thought was this very like businessy
Mhm.
community. I just had no idea. And then you swoop in and have all of this like woo-woo conversation that is also very practical in many ways, right? Like it felt very grounded is the word I'm looking for. And I was like, whoa, it's like I have to reach out. I know it's not happening anymore, but I just have to talk to this person.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it gave me permission to be like,
Oh,
okay, maybe I can like lean in a little more, or maybe there is someone I can, that someone's doing it or someone's done it, or like it just gives
yeah.
permission. So I want to point that out because being in our authenticity does more than just help ourselves. Like it truly does give others permission and normalization too.
Oh, that makes my heart so warm, Barcy. That's amazing. It was kind of scary, I would say.
Mm,
And they were truly just business networking in the beginning. But I saw who Carrie was and I was like, oh, she's like really open minded. And so, talking about business through the lens of spirituality is something that I hope for the Joy Rebellion. I want, like, I'm even having a workshop about the astrology roadmap for joy, to really
mm,
understand how to guide your business in a lot of ways in knowing the cosmic energy and coming from a very grounded, practical, like you were saying, very logical way. But like, I think there's a room for everyone. Like, I'm hearing now there's corporations, or at least before a lot of the defunding, there was so much of an opportunity to be able to help the employees personal development, self
mhm.
development, leadership development, right? And they were using human design and other tools in those spaces. So I feel like the popularity, whether it's on TikTok or Instagram or whatever social media, I think it's spreading everywhere. And so these old systems are now picking up on the what they think is a trend, but I actually think it's like just the beginning of something more sustainable and long term.
I love that. I think so too. And when I was doing my Reiki certification, the woman her name was Jamie Wanzi, who was attuning me, a lot of her business is going into corporations and offering courses for them and workshops in
Yes.
her realm of like all of the things we're talking about joy and self-love and self-authenticity and all these beautiful things and just some beautiful programming. It's very like enlightening to see that
Yeah.
she's existing in this way and just being who she is and offering it to corporations and knowing that they're buying into that too, that there's space for
Oh
it.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And when I moved to Ohio, I was like, oh no, I lost the woo
Yeah.
crowd.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit fearful of it. But I went to I was again looking for community. So I went to the Women's Small Business Association here, went to a little party that they had, talked about my work, and then I think two meetups later, they were like, hey, by the way, we have a women's conference that we do every year. Would you like to be a speaker? And I led a whole thing about how to find joy for high achievers.
Perfect.
And so there is a room. If you're listening and you're scared and you are still in hiding, totally okay. I very much deeply resonate with that. I'm still in a lot of ways hiding my fullest expression because I'm still unfolding. So that is okay. Permission granted to unfold. And in the unfolding, what I'm learning now is, oh, when you share from the place of honesty and it's still messy, we don't have enough leaders sharing that experience. We have the perfectly packaged, curated leader who's like the guru, right? The person who's figured it out. They're at the top of the mountain. But we don't have enough examples, in my opinion, of leadership and people who are just showing up in the mess and to normalize the mess and give, like you said, permission to people to be like, oh, even if I'm in the messy, I can still like show up as someone helpful just by sharing my story or starting a community or whatever it is that you want to do, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the fears around that is that, oh, people won't trust me to
Mm-hmm.
be able to whatever it is they're doing. We're going to breach the trust factor, or they won't believe that I can do X still, or, I think that can come into play quite a bit. Like, as someone who owns an agency as well, it's like something I happen to think about as in my authentic self, that I try to show up as myself as much as possible. You see it happen sometimes where people start to treat your authority differently. And it's like trying to figure out how to marry the two together so that they understand that it's okay to be human, but we still have to get some stuff done. Like,
I
we
know,
still
I
have to be
know.
professional. Like, it's an interesting balance. So I'm just pointing that
It
out.
is. I so get that, Barcy, because of the fact that I value diplomas clearly and certifications and all the education and, value the wisdom that you gain from the classroom and from other mentors and, universities. I still value that. And what I can say is that what I predict, this is my opinion, but what I predict is like with AI becoming more common, and we can Google or we can ask ChatGPT things. The wisdom that we used to have to go to university for is going to be so much more accessible. And what is going to be different and separates you from a robot is not your perfectionism, right? Because you can't beat a
Right.
robot at perfectionism unless you're ChatGPT, because it still has major issues
Yeah.
of accuracy. But like, you know what I mean, right? It's like that people are going to probably lean heavily on human experiences and valuing that shared experience versus, hey, this is what the books say, this is what the data says. Because even for me, I have problems with science right now where, oh, yeah, right, we never actually, used controls of women in our tampon studies, like
Right.
stuff like that,
So strange.
where it's like, okay, well, it was medically backed and scientifically proven that this works, but hey, what were the controls? And hey, what were the facts? Did those facts change? Like science is also changing as information is brought to us, right? And so the legitimacy of the human experience and the uniqueness of what you've gone through and the uniqueness of mine, even though we have some very core similarities, it's still uniquely different.
Right.
And I think that will become more valuable as long as it's coming from a place of integrity and not just like pandering,
Mm.
you know,
Hmm.
to a belief or a thought or people, like if you are truly showing up as you, that is what I believe will bring you joy and the purpose and the fulfillment that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's already happening in that we aren't in need of information
Mm-hmm.
anymore because that is so readily available. Like, you just to summarize what you just shared, like in a sentence, it's like we have information at our fingertips now. It doesn't devalue education. It just means that we don't have to seek it out the way we used to have to and pay for it the way we used to have to and all this. So it comes back to marketing too. Like, what are you wanting to pay for? What do you need to pay
Mm-hmm.
for? And then that the constant conversation in those arenas is about trust. It's much harder to figure out the discernment, the trust factor, because oftentimes you get the thing and you're like, oh, I could have Googled that. Or, there's like so many, I could just go on and on. But I agree with you. I think we're in a good place for those of us who want to lean into our humanness
Mm-hmm.
because it's going to be the commodity. It's going to be more valuable, I think, even more than we have put value on it in the recent decades that like our parents have experienced that it has trickled down to our experience. It's something I've been wanting to ask this whole session, but going back to when you were in, your third or fourth iteration of what you wanted to do, but like picking Joy Guide, right? Joy Guide.
Uh-huh. Yep.
What helped you land on that? Like what helped you land in this sort of encompassing framework for the way you guide people?
Yeah. I think because specific tenets that I have, values and principles that I have helped me choose the name. So what I mean by that is I knew it was going to be joy. People are already calling me that. So that just it made sense. And they were expressing to me, my clients, even though we were doing clothes, were expressing to me how much joy I brought to their lives by sharing the deeper wisdom behind just the clothes, that they were experiencing, whether it was divorce or a new awakening in their life. Like they really were showing me my gifts. And they were like, man, you're so good at like guiding me. Like you should be a coach. And then I heard that you should be a coach. But I had this like prickly, like, oh, I don't love that word.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because I was looking for coaches and I came across a lot of bad ones, and same in the spiritual community, it was like I met a lot of respected gurus that then I was disappointed, right? Same thing when I worked in Hollywood. I met some celebrities and I was like disappointed.
Yeah.
And I think that reality of knowing that coach was not the right word for me led me to guide because it had me hone in on the integrity of the experience of what I wanted to provide. And I'm not here to like coach you and tell you what to do and tell you to do 20 more push-ups or whatever it is. Like that to me like sounded too sportsy and I'm not a sportsy girl. And also, the coach from the business aspect, like there's a very executive masculine energy to it at that time as well. When I
Yeah.
was first experiencing it, it's changed now. But like for me at that time, it was like, oh no, I just want to be alongside. I don't want to be up here as a hierarchy of an authority. I want to be right by your side. And I thought of like a zoo tour guide or like some sort of like funny comical guide like here's the tour of the animals. And I thought, oh, that sounds fun. And it was so funny because I still received some messages when I was trying to look for a job and was really worried that being a joy guide was not going to work out. I remember like looking up on LinkedIn, like, what are jobs for guides? And I still get like, be a zoo guide, be a tour guide, be like all kinds of guides. And I'm like, no, I figured it out. Thanks, guys. I appreciate
How
it.
funny.
But yeah, I really want to emphasize that I am not the expert in your life. I am here to say, here's what I've learned. Here are the good and bad things. Here are the warning signs. Don't let that lion eat you. And, let's have fun. Like that's kind of the approach that came to Joy Guide June.
Thank you for that. That makes so much sense. And I have my layers of complication around the word coach as well. I ran the other way when I got certified and I was like, whoa, this is what's happening in here. I'm good. Like, I don't want anything to do with that. And this
Yeah.
was back in like 2014. So it was a while ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
But I was like, similar to you, wanting to come back to this idea of guidance. The guidance part really resonates. So that makes so much sense.
And again, the power part of like the power is in your hands. I'm here to
Right.
guide you, but you can go look at, the dangerous animals if you want. The anacondas are that way. But like, you know what I mean? Like totally cool with that. But I want you to choose the anaconda. Like
Yeah.
choose, whatever it is that you want to choose. And I'm just going to be here to like support you, whatever choice you make, but the power is in your hands.
What a great way to also unravel a codependent, upbringing, because I have that going on too. And it's an interesting thing to then jump into a one-on-one
Mhm.
service style business because that codependency will weave its way into. So I love this sort of approach. I think helps with that as well.
It keeps me very accountable. And when
Allows
I'm
the
not, I
space.
go to Codependence Anonymous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about so much today, which I'm so grateful for. If you could share one takeaway that you hope someone walks away with from the conversation that we had today, what would that be?
Yeah. The one takeaway would be to see where you're lying to yourself in your life right now. Getting honest, I believe, is one of the quickest ways to figure out what is holding you back from your joy and what is your joy. And self awareness to get honest and the courage to get honest can be very scary. But again, your friendly neighborhood joy guide, June, is just around the corner if you need any help.
Speaking of that, which corner are you around? How can they find
Okay.
you?
The sexy corner.
Yeah.
Yeah. The corners that I'm around now, I would say Substack for sure. So you can find my Substack on Joy Guide June, my website, joyguidejune.com. Pretty much if you just Google Joy Guide June, you'll find me. But I am going to be launching a YouTube. I'm saying this also to keep myself accountable. But mostly I am pouring my heart and soul into the Substack so that, and season 2 of the podcast, so that people can kind of, again, find that community. I really want to build the community of people who are ready, who want to be a leader of their own lives and are ready for their joy.
Love that. Thank you so much for just everything you shared. It was beyond valuable. And I know so many people are going to resonate with so much of it. And
Thank
I know
you.
I did. So thank you.
Thank you. You're the best.
Thank you so much for listening to the Boss Goddess podcast. And if you're ready to stop looking outward for answers and start trusting yourself and looking inward, to start reframing your path as your power and reclaiming your voice as your sacred guide forward, then be sure to get my free Voice of the Goddess ritual guide at boss-goddess.co/ritual guide. I'll see you on the inside.